Hi folks, welcome back to Atebeno Park. It's Dino Bob, and today we're putting in the Torvosaurus exhibit. Uh, we're going to start with the care, building, and shelter, which is an extension of the Camarasaurus barn. You can see that there's been a lot of landscaping in the background there because one of the first things I put in was a service tunnel, which you can catch glimpses of to the right of the screen as we're working on this building occasionally. Um, and Yeah, that's something of an experiment for me. You're not going to see a lot of its inside on this build, but after this, I think the next build will be, excuse me, not build, but video will be a tour of Atebeno Park so far, which will help catch you up on the recovery that I did for having screwed up the save, uh, a lot of minor changes, a lot of fine details that I hadn't covered in videos that I had been adding as I went along, and even some more buildings. You'll catch a glimpse of one of those later in this video. One of the things of messing with your terrain in this game is the plants no longer follow it. So they kind of end up hanging in the air or buried in the ground. And when they get buried in the ground, you almost always lose them. So you can't even delete them to cut down the piece count. So I spent a lot more time than you're watching messing with plants to recover from all the groundwork I had to do to set up the arrangement with that access tunnel. I wasn't sure how tall to make the building for these animals, and I eventually figured out when one wandered by the building after I put them in that they don't need as tall a building as the Camarasaurus. You see me putting a full-size floor on there, and I will change that out later in the build um, for something a little more to scale with the animals. The other problem that I was hitting on this build is I was trying to group it with the Camarasaurus barn, and once you move the building, the game often gets a little confused about where the grid is and how to match things up with it. So I was dealing with that. You can see how those uh, columns ended up not in line with the first one. When I tried to put them on a grid, they jumped off. Um, that was a relatively minor version of the kind of problems that I was having. So this is the steel protective fence, so our keepers can interact with the animals and deal with them without getting eaten. Uh, and now I'm working on the stairwell. I thought closing off the stairwell was probably a good idea. Uh, Too much keeper activity there could bring unwanted attention from the animals. Uh, and I spent a lot of time fussing on getting this right because I was not playing with grid-sized pieces. I narrowed the stairwell so it would fit in this space because I didn't want to give the keeper side a ton of space in this building because the building isn't all that big, especially compared to the previous one, the Camarasaurus spot. Threshold for the doorway, and then back to the stairwell. So much stairwell, so much stairwell. Um, I needed the double width wall there because of the platform to work with the narrower stairs to get it all up in the space. You got a glimpse there of a Torvosaurus nose as one came into the building while I was still building it. Um, that little cavity there is going to turn into a non-functional storeroom, and I'll put a door on that eventually. I'm capping these walls because they didn't blend together well enough for me um, with the brickwork, and then deciding to use the stone columns to be the wall for that storage room. Um, and there's its door. So, really long build, adding the mesh to block off some of the areas where a nose might get in at a keeper, or a young Torvosaurus, should these things breed, try to get through the big bars. Hay, hay for the animals to sleep on when they finally decide they'll do that. And then thinking about the roof and the outside of the building. So there's the door onto the loading platform. And more fussing when I find things poking through the walls. It would be nice if railings had a version that left the stanchions fully upright when you're putting them on a slope stairwell, but we don't have that yet, so it is what it is. Um, Short of building a complete custom railing, which, in this game is very doable, but not something I want to do right now. So a little bit of aerial view, get a sense of where it is. You get to see the viewing building in that fast shot. And that's a clone of the Chimerosaurus building. Obviously, the signage is different, but the rest of it is pretty much exactly the same. Also, well, the landscaping around it is different. Uh, so, a lot of fussing in this video rather than perhaps the more interesting build stuff. But it does reflect the nature of this build, so that gives you a better sense of what it's like working with the game, I hope. Um, anyway, the skylight is there, so the animals have light inside the building. I didn't get around to putting lighting in on the building for the most part. That's something I'll have to do later. Um, so let's see, what is coming up next? Oh yeah, they going to move to the outside after I do the adjustments for having the roof on there and do the trim around the opening, because concrete block like that just won't hang in the air like that. There's a shallow place here, and I decided to fill that with rocks to keep an animal from getting trapped in there. That would be particularly a concern with younger animals, rather than the big guys who probably just wouldn't go there. So zooming around, checking things out, and then time to put the ivy, because I went back to the viewing platform to see what could be seen, and there's really no good way to completely screen out this building from the viewing platform, so I decided to camouflage it a little bit more. If I had done the walls with a standard block as opposed to the backstage block, which has the color variations, I probably could have tinted the whole thing to a sandstone, and it would have, you know, been a little less obvious modern construction. But eh, it works for a little more realistic build, I guess. But I did go with a more sandstony color for the concrete around it, at least. Um, so at this point, you're watching me work on the rocks around one of those buildings I mentioned that you haven't seen me put in, and starting the bluff on the river side of the access tunnel. It's really great with the modular rocks being able to scale the cliffs and stuff. You can get really nice effects really fast and cover a lot of ground, so therefore fewer pieces, and that's always kinder to your CPU and your frame rates. Um, uh, there's still a fair number of rocks because a fair bit of turf that's being covered there, and trying to blend it into the river edge as well. Um, but boy, the modular system once again is a godsend for being able to do all kinds of special effects for putting in these builds. So, unlike certain other games, there is no way to pull the terrain up and over to make a tunnel or to tunnel through the terrain. So you kind of got to bury your tunnel with modular pieces. And I'm doing that with the cliff walls on the riverside and terrain up to it. You can pull the terrain up and then level it, and it'll skip the tunnel, particularly if you've got a path underneath it. But it will keep that level once it gets to the other side. And I used that to help lay out where this tunnel would be. It did encroach into the river a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that was a clean visual look with the shoreline there. So you see a lot of rubble going down here. Um, so a bit of experiment on how to deal with this sort of thing and to cover up the top of it. I didn't want to do it pure rock, which I had tried in alpha, and the animals got kind of glitchy walking on it. They're a little bit better at walking on it now, but I didn't want a pure rock effect up there. Um, I wanted to have some plants. That's why I did the mulch thing. If the mulch were recolorable, it would be even better if the mulch had some other textures. I know it has gravel now uh, as an option, but the sort of greystone gravel wasn't quite what I wanted for this either. So you'll see me playing a lot of plants. I could have tried pulling out some of those mulch pieces and expanding other ones. They're already very deep to accentuate the irregularity of the surface. So there we are. We got the animals. They go up there. And now we will switch to blending in the viewing building, getting the path to it. And you can see I put the signage in already. And a quick cut to the backstage where I put building numbers on them. And now we've got some cinematics to close out this build. When I first put the animals in, for some reason, they were palling around a lot. They're, walking next to each other or following on each other, or like this one coming in and coming over to the other one. I don't know if that's extra animation the guys did or just coincidence. Like, watch this synchronized stroll to the water hole. Perfect viewing point for any guests up in the viewing thing. But they're not exactly synced. Yeah. If it's fortuitous, it was nicely fortuitous. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I'll be doing some more Atebeno Park, as I think I already mentioned. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, or at least like. Leave comments if you got something to say. If you don't like what I'm doing, let me know. If you have things you'd like to see, let me know. So this is Dino Bob signing off. Take care. Be kind to each other out there. Lord knows we all need it.